Inflation is high, and for most people, real wages are falling. Britain needs a pay rise is the line you'll hear from trade unionists or left-wing journalists on the telly. But for some MPs, the focus on wage increases is a little close to home. Every few months, one of them says, "We don't earn enough, we can't get the best people." Of course, that's a stupid argument. The former CEO of Thames Water, who recently quit, was on a salary of £1.5 million a year. It didn't seem to make that much difference. And it's important to say that the basic salary for MPs is presently £86,000 a year, and they recently received a £2,400 pay rise in April. The latest parliamentarian to moan about not earning enough is former Chancellor Sajid Javid. Speaking at an event hosted by Whitehall think tank, the Institute for Government, he said this: "If I had my way, I would halve the number of MPs and double the salaries. That wouldn't cost the taxpayer a penny, and you would get a much higher quality of parliament and ministers." Now, at the moment, a key part of the job for MPs is casework. If there's a really pressing issue, you can contact your MP. Many people do. And so it's a big part of the job. They have staff members committed to addressing casework. Given each constituency is presently around 80,000 people, what Javid is proposing here is to make that 160,000 people. That's twice the amount of casework for every MP and their office. Now, maybe Javid would say MPs' offices should have loads more resources to deal with people's needs. Or maybe, just maybe, he doesn't think the little people matter in politics. This point he's made as well is just utterly surreal when you consider we have around 900 lords in our second chamber, and as far as I know, he doesn't want to scrap that either. He certainly doesn't think ordinary people should be MPs too. We know that because he went on to say this: "You tend to get in Parliament either really rich people who don't need money and therefore don't care if their salary is 88,000 or 28,000, or you'll get people that were earning sort of £30,000 a year. 80,000 is a big jump, but they might not come with the skills that Parliament needs." You get all sorts of people in Parliament, even those losers who earn the average salary. Imagine that. Teachers, nurses, maybe even manual workers. I know it's crazy, don't fall over laughing. Who next? The Chuckle Brothers? Being serious for a moment, I'm interested in what skills MPs need precisely. Are they the skills Javid learned at Deutsche Bank, where he reputedly earned £3 million a year before becoming an MP? Oh, you might have worked in the NHS, or you might have actually built something with your own hands. You've got the calluses to prove it, but I'm afraid you don't have the necessary skills for politics. This thinking only makes sense if you believe that the ideal skill set for politicians is to basically say yes to whatever the financial services industry wants. We want lower regulation, sure. We want lower taxes on the rich, no problem. Can you make sure that people pay more taxes for work than wealth? Absolutely. Wow, you're really good at politics. You have a great skill set. Why, thank you. This might sound like a joke, but it's genuinely how many people within the establishment think, including Sajid Javid. It's just he's been stupid enough to say it openly. To have the right calibre of people in politics, we need a basic salary of £176,000 a year, almost 6 times the average wage. How else do you expect people to leave the banking industry and deregulate stuff to make their mates rich? Michael, should MP pay start at £176,000 a year?
No. No, absolutely shouldn't. I don't think anyone's looking at Westminster and thinking, you know what we need? We need more people from the banking sector and people who work in consultancy. Because that's who you're going to bring over, right? Not very, very few people are on or are going to see sort of 86K as not much money, or 88K or whatever it is, right? You top doctors, lawyers, all of these people with decent jobs, they might be on a similar amount. They're not going to be taking a massive pay cut to become an MP. Also, you've got to remember you get expenses as an MP, right? So there are very few other jobs where you get those expenses. The one argument I do see, which would be, where I can see like, it would be unpopular for MPs to do it, but it might make sense, is increasing their budget to sort of employ more staff. I think it might make sense to have more policy experts who are working in Parliament. It seems like sometimes you don't have enough people to sort of scrutinise the legislation properly. And if we're thinking about why good people like Myrie Black are leaving, maybe if you did give them a bit more staff so that they could, employ people to do some of the different elements of the jobs that they're not expert in, that could make sense. But the idea that we should be putting more money in MPs' pockets when everyone else is taking a pay cut is completely offensive, frankly, especially as MPs have had their incomes protected over the past decade when everyone else's have been stagnating. So MPs always like, so it's not us who decide that the wage goes up, it's this independent committee. Yeah, but that's not how it works for everyone else, right? So they're protected against inflation, other workers aren't, and now they want another pay rise.
I've got a question for our audience watching this and listening to it. Would you feel more confident in the political system if we had half the MPs, but they were earning twice as much, more than £175,000 a year? Would you think that's a step in the right direction? Because, of course, with first past the post, what we hear all the time is the importance of the constituency link. So if your MP was earning that much money, would you feel that there's a connection between you and them? Let me know in the comments. Sticking with this for a moment, I have a question. Who is the most impressive government in modern history? Who had the most enduring legacy? Some people might say Thatcher or Blair or Wilson. I think they're wrong, because the obvious answer is the Labour government of 1945. Almost 80 years later, there is so much they introduced which we still have, from child benefit to the NHS. Ernest Bevin, the guy who spearheaded this country's drive to develop a nuclear weapon as Foreign Secretary, previously worked as a labourer and lorry driver. Meanwhile, Nye Bevin, the godfather of the NHS, had been a miner. He wasn't the grandson of a miner. This wasn't a catchphrase being used by somebody on LinkedIn. He was an actual miner. One person was responsible for Britain getting the atom bomb. I don't like nuclear weapons, but that's a big deal. The other for the NHS. What Conservative MP has recently achieved anything on a remotely similar scale, Mr. Javid? Furlough, perhaps. Sunak would say so. But when they were confronted with the pandemic, the government were a walking, talking catastrophe. The logical conclusion, if we're to look at the last several years, is the complete opposite of what he's saying. In fact, we need more people with backgrounds in manual and care work rather than financial services, consultancy, and these other Mickey Mouse jobs they seem to have. Michael, quickly, if Javid is wrong here, then how do we get those better MPs, which I think broadly everyone seems to agree on these days?
Yeah, I mean, those examples are instructive, right? So Bevin and Bevan, that was when the Labour Party had a very strong organic connection to a very, very vibrant and dynamic labour movement. So those were people who rose up in trade unions, which are incredibly meritocratic organisations. It's no coincidence that it's often trade union leaders who are much more convincing speakers than people who end up in the Labour shadow cabinet, right? I do think trade unions are more meritocratic than the Labour parliamentary party at the moment, right? So it would either be to strengthen connections between the Labour Party and trade unions, but I mean, we probably aren't going to have as vibrant a trade union movement now as we did in the 40s, right? The economy has changed, so that probably is going to mean something along the lines of open selection. So having a process whereby people don't have to sort of integrate into the factional internal dynamics of the Labour Party to get anywhere, but can instead make an independent name for themselves, show that they are a successful, inspirational person, and then stand on those terms, not because they're unthreatening to whoever happens to be leader of the Labour Party at whatever point in time. So I think it would be something like open selections where you encourage genuinely the best, the brightest, not the people who are most desperate to earn £176,000 a year, like Sajid Javid is saying, but people who actually want to serve their communities and who also have something to say for themselves, right? Which isn't just they knew the right person and they spent enough time licking people's asses in Labour students, right? So I think it will be about open selections, essentially. And as much as it is possible, redynamising the Labour movement and picking Labour candidates from there.